and a sharp contributive edge that can make it all easier and better and more productive. Let's take some time to sharpen our axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Bern Moses. Welcome to another in our series of ongoing verbal essays brought to you in this television format. It's a pleasure for us to be with you today. It's a pleasure for us to have back again this week, Stephen Mills. And thanks for being here, Stephen. I know you have a busy schedule, and we love to have you and your insight on the program. Bern, I think you wanted to introduce the topic today.
Well, it was kind of like a carryover from last week. Our view is, if they're with us again, might remember, or to review for those who weren't, the fact that last week we all had a certain amount of trauma in our life. Stephen had a computer and an automobile stolen. You were in the process of changing careers, and I was in the process of changing physical, or considering the change of physical environments, which have really been delightful for us. And I had some people talk to me this week and say, all well and good, but all that chatter that you guys were doing was pretty Pollyannish. I might have called it pusillanimous Pollyanna, like Pap, you know what I mean? Unless I knew who was doing the chattering and the talking and how they were managing it on a day-to-day basis. But if someone called these postures that you were taking Pollyanna and unreal and unrealistic and even weak, it comes up, you know, how would you defend against that? Yeah. How would you say, wait a minute now?
I've seen a lot of people's lives in my work as an educator, a trainer, a writer of educational and training material, in their selling environment, in their management environments, in the emergency responders fields with law enforcement and emergency medical care providers, in which their traumas seem to heap and are accumulated, gathered, and clung to. I know, forgive me. There's a tenacious weaving them into the fiber of their life. Like they're always going to be there with me. And growing up where I did on the prairies, wide open is pretty doggone nice to me. And I'd always noticed when I moved into the city environment that there are more and more hindrances to people being open and relaxed and frank with each other in a way that they seem to have the same bars on their minds and their behaviors as they do on their homes. And some of that I have addressed with literally trying to unravel that clinging to resentment and upset and surprise and disappointment and lost expectations, lost materials, lost income, lost award, lost applause, lost relationships, lost friendships, uncertainties, and misunderstandings, both from me and to me. Those are the common aspects of people's lives, not every day. And certainly last week we talked about some significant changes in our lives and that sometimes are brought on from other people's actions. Theft is one, landlords, landladies, people who are taking actions that affect and impose upon other people's lives. That is out of our control. I've never yet seen a life that was in control.
Good.
I've seen a thermostat, and that's about as close as I can come to finding anything that's a control mechanism, truly a solid, with a few aircraft devices that might work, some ship's devices. But other than that, they're pretty doggone rare and seldom, if ever, applicable to a human life. So I've been looking for what is it that I can use moment to moment to moment to move through, walk through, if you will, surface through the choking, drowning feelings of sometimes whatever's thrown in a day, to thrive and not just survive. I think any of us knows and sees many examples in our day-to-day life and in our own history, our own past, being in the muck and the mire and the wrestling of what goes on moment to moment in our lives and careers, and yet to just let that be the sole boundary of my life just seemed untenable, totally unacceptable. And so I'd look for some tools to moment by moment manage or address the situation so that I could emerge from just surviving to being effective, responsive, contributive, able to adjust instead of just adapt like some cricket or praying mantis waiting for the next bug to come by that's devourable. And I'd noticed in life that many people think there's far too little to go around. And I'm not convinced of that. I know that many of our economic pundits have said that, the people who say they know. And yet I see the inventors. I've been privy to the scientific community, to the medical community, to the engineering and architectural community, to such a degree that I see them remarkably effective in reinventing what we can do with what we have, which seems so little, and now all of a sudden is quite ample. If not abundant. You mentioned last week, I think, Gina, abundant. That process of recognizing that flourishing in our lives rather than just that minimal, scarce situation. And I think that's made a big difference. And yet to do that, I had to learn some of the tools that you taught me, how to step by step forgive myself for blundering and bumbling on, not being fully prepared. And to ask for coaching, some teamwork, some additional supportiveness from people, from myself, my own inner selves. And in that way move to a place where I didn't cling to the resentment that's typically going to bubble up, wanting what was, wanting what ought to be, wanting...
Should have been, could have been.
Yes, exactly. And then instead, reinventing from this forward. I don't find that Pollyannish. I find it incredibly resourceful, demanding that I function as a human being in a teamwork environment where I don't have to be the Lone Ranger. And I remember that icon, that hero, if you will, the Xena warrior of the world, and the Lone Ranger, they weren't alone. That's the remarkable part of watching those heroes and heroines is they weren't alone. And take that as an example and use the life formula. Now, you've taught me these tools. To move from fear into a love mode is not Pollyanna to me. It's a significant, deliberate use of the mind's capabilities, our capacities. We've both been practicing it. And I see it just in the grieving I've done about last week's episode. And I see myself not locking my life down and yet not being foolishly flip about the security of my home. There are no bars on my doors or my mind because of the active, deliberate work I've been working on.
Something comes up that some people might say too, that this position, this posturing, this love mode, this adjustment subjects you to abuse. That people can take advantage of you easily once they realize you're that way. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I find it the opposite. Not because people won't press the boundaries. People will do that, and all people do. Typically, they attempt to understand where are the boundaries here. And when they find them, very seldom, or a very different kind of boundary compared to most people, they are welcomed in and typically aren't as desperate. Most of the people I encounter are in search of that acceptance and that sense of worthiness that they've never yet found for themselves, and seldom found from the others that it would have been nice to have had it from them, their parents, caregivers in their life and their upbringing and in their current circumstances at work or other places, or non-work, on the street. And to provide that is not a Pollyanna-ish thing. It's a solid contribution to people's lives.
When people are exposed to this kind of thing, I know we make a comment in Command Commission, that people seldom, if ever, will change because of you. In other words, you can posture and lecture and say this is the way it should be, could be, should have been, and they'll hunker down and just do what they want to do. But many people may change for you. You know what I mean? There's a big difference, because if you're posturing yourself in the way that we've been talking, and people perceive that, okay, they may make adjustments. Not always. I mean, we can't promise anything, but they are more likely to make adjustments in favor of you. For example, the person who has your computer, or anyone who you've done business with, after a while they go, gee, this is a different experience. I don't want to do this because I don't want to lose the love of that person. I don't want to lose the respect and the regard, of that person, because that uniqueness comes through. Pretty fascinating. Pretty fascinating. Gina, do you have anything along this line? That if someone says this is foolishness, Pollyanna, you guys are too good for your own good?
Well, yeah, I did. I was thinking about a statement that's used quite often nowadays, and maybe if we could take that and explore it a little bit and turn it around. And that statement is an alternative lifestyle. And that typically defines a particular lifestyle. But if we can say alternatives, we have alternatives. We have so many choices in our lives, but often we act out of fear because we only see one or two choices, and we don't like either of them.
We lose our choices when we do.
And that's it. And we think that's it. But if we could just start over, like we did we mentioned last week with you, now you're starting over with a clean, blank canvas, completely fresh, and you want to start with nothing, because if there's already something on there, if you've already painted black and red on there, no matter what else you put on the canvas, you've already got black and red on there, which defines and limits you. But if you could start with absolutely nothing, then you're free to choose anything from countless millions of possibilities that you could put onto the canvas, which becomes your life, your activities, your focuses, your, we talked quite a while ago about putting together what it is that we're all about, what we're focused on. And we can do that generally, and we can also do it specifically. And that gives us tremendous freedom, because suddenly we're not limited by, well, I either get a job at the factory or I work for my dad on the farm. Well, and you may not want to do either of those things, or you may not have talents or gifts in either of those areas. But if you can erase those and start fresh, all of a sudden you could be a computer programmer, or a dancer, or a marketing specialist, or a communications director, or a deep sea diver, or all these things are suddenly possible when your canvas isn't filled up by one or two alternatives which are not what you want.
And yet, let's be candid enough to realize that both of you, perhaps all of us, I'd like to be included, if I could, have been preparing ourselves beyond our immediate need. If you just handle today's event, and not trouble yourself about expanding, learning and growing, I could see where you might get overwhelmed. So many people we encounter out there are incurious. Not that they lack curiosity, but they're purposely don't want to hear your stuff. You kind of have to prepare yourself for that moment when you may be challenged. It's kind of like the life formula. We say you've got to practice that when you don't need it. Just use it and, employ it and examine it and identify it and play with it. And all of a sudden, when you really get hit with something, you go, it's right there to use. But, it's so easy not to do that because, it's easy to survive. Not realizing that maybe there comes a moment when you're overwhelmed if you're not prepared. And I think both of you do that. I mean, my evidence is that you keep commitments, you're thinking all the time and contributing when you can, and that's what it's about. It's fascinating. What a show! What a panel! That's fascinating. Earlier tonight we were discussing too how many people. I mean, I think I can change the direction of this a little bit. I think we have some time. We were talking about network marketing. This show is about life, living, and making a living, and we were talking about network marketing and the percentages of success that are there, and we were kind of having a good time talking about that, and I thought we could pick up on some of it. The fact that someone was saying, well, aren't you better off going the 80-20? And what they really mean is getting into the mainstream of things where your chances are much better of surviving.
In a
maybe even
typical-
thriving, yeah.
Typical job, you mean?
Yeah, and yet there was also the discussion, yeah, but you're limited there. I mean, most people,
You're very much at the power and mercy of your
oh,
employer.
yeah, you're an
Market
accommodator.
conditions,
Yeah.
mergers, buyouts, all the different things that happen.
Oh, see, you were subject to that. You were subjected to that.
Both of us.
Yeah, I haven't been subject to that for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, since 1955, 57. The other day, in concert with this idea, I had a delightful man who is now in networking say, I just can't figure out what's going on. I have always been, my entire life, an overachiever. He'd won trophies and medals and been recognized for his excellence and had gotten promotions and went from this company to that one and always became a leader very quickly, and yet here he was in networking and nothing seemed to work. And he was really genuinely confused about it. And as I was listening to him, it became quite apparent what it was. Were you there when we were discussing that?
No, I was not.
It was evident that what he'd been doing all of his life, so typically and understandably, is accommodating. Because everything he had done, the structure was laid out for him, flowed at him, you know what I mean? He was what they call a good hand. Knows he handled it well, politicked and, and competed, and therefore was honored, but yet it was an accommodation. It was coming at him and he had to handle it, and he did that well. All of a sudden he's in a position where nothing is coming at him.
Well, he has to go out and get it.
He has to go out and do it all, and
Go
it's a
out and
matter
hunt
of
it down and
initiative.
kill it and-
Yeah, and he had never thought about that, and I think, from my sense of him in the last couple of weeks, he's accepted that responsibility. No, he's accepted it, and he's beginning to initiate, to venture out, to establish, and it might have been all he needed to hear was the fact that he'd been accommodating. Now, a lot of people can't make that shift right away because we're not prepared. We had to get our authority back and our esteem, and that's what most of this is all about, because most of this has been taken away from us. Our authority, our exuberance, our excitement, our esteem has been diminished by well-meaning and loving parents and peers and teachers and even the church in some cases. But I mean, it's part of it. And now we talk a lot about just sitting around a table like this once in a while and celebrating our capacities. I don't remember doing that all the way through my youth at the dinner table, and I don't remember doing it down at the corner drugstore when we hung out, with the boys, and didn't do it in any classes, never did it in the military. It wasn't until we got into this kind of environment we began to say, wow, I can see and hear and feel and smell and taste and think, and I can start over. In other words, I've got the capacity. And to just celebrate that and to accept the authority that's implied in that, pretty fascinating, and then assume the responsibility. How many times have we heard people say, it just didn't work out?
And blame the it. And
The it.
as though they have to blame it or themselves. It's an either-or situation.
Right.
That's frustrating because they're left with few other choices but those two. And that doesn't seem like an adequate set to me. Where is the flaw? Is it in the timing? Is it in the deep preparation or the ill-prepared person? Is it in the outside forces from that the company environment or the product line that they're representing? But we're so busy looking for a blame, a scapegoat.
And that's fairly typical, isn't it?
And so damaging.
Yeah. Everything's got to be someone's fault.
Yeah, and technically we can simply say, gosh, I'm not prepared. And say, what do we need to do to pull together to be prepared. Or better prepared? And then that serendipitous, magical, seemingly, wow, it happened this time. Kind of a wonder that happened.
Well, and I think that's a really important point because we talk a lot about being unprepared and how that causes so many struggles for us in our lives. And I know that in every essay it seems that you do, there's a portion of what it takes to become prepared. And it would be really nice sometime to do a program just on becoming prepared and taking the bits and pieces of what it takes to become prepared, because I find that so often we say, I know I'm not prepared. I'm horrible at this. I'm not prepared to be a parent, or I'm not prepared to take on this new challenge, or to be single, or to be married, or to be old, or to be young, or to be whatever. We're not prepared for these things. But we don't always know how to be prepared.
And I might suggest, too, that there's a step even before that, to re-prepare.
Yeah.
See, if a person has been de-prepared, it's almost impossible to prepare them.
Before you get them back up to...
Yeah, in other words, they step into this environment and we educate them about the product, we educate them about what to say and what to do and how to do it, and we find they don't do it because something back here needs to be taken care of. They've been de-prepared. In other words, someone said or didn't say or did or didn't do something that diminished them, and now here they are, and they're not ready. They're a little bit overwhelmed. And so to be able to go back there and re-prepare, and of course that's what some of those essays are designed to do, that life formula and command commission, bottlenecks of bereavement. And we always have to kind of go, take pains to do that. It's like when you suffered your losses last week, you got to go back and check your re-preparation. Exactly. Am I really okay? Can I move on from here, or do I have to go back and take care of some things? It's like forgiveness is a major issue. So if we don't forgive the inappropriateness of our life, the appropriateness continues. And until we can, kind of re-perceive that experience and give our subconscious mind something good to hang on to, we're in difficulty. It's not enough just to forget it, because it's still there's a hole there. You got to fill the hole with a new understanding, new perception. What a gift that is! My goodness.
It's almost as if there was a weaving, a tapestry that I've heard us describe before, where last week those losses seemed like somehow there's this strand of barbed wire stuck in my being, in my fiber, in my fabric. And doggone it, I was examining this week to see if it was clear. Having more calls to make, more details to kind of reconnect pieces of my life and my work. And I found it, a strand of barbed wire, and you can't just yank them out. Like you just can't. Otherwise you end up losing a whole lot of what else is good about your life. So I tried to unravel, tease, and I was thinking about the person who had broken into my home and taken some belongings there. And the thing that came up this week was there was an old piece from my great-grandfather tucked away in my passport, my U.S. passport. And I don't know that the person even saw it or found it or would care or would know it.
Right.
It was an old piece of currency from the Civil War of the United States in 1863. It wasn't a 25-cent coin, it was a 25-cent bill.
I've seen it. Yeah.
And I often use it as an example with students to show them that often there are things in our lives that are valuable and yet not useful any longer. Because you can't use it in a vending machine or a video game or whatever, but it is valuable. It holds value. And in that, I thought of what you were describing to us is there are parts of our lives we need to relinquish to re-prepare. Not to say they weren't of value,
Right.
not to discredit some of the upbringing and teaching and the information that we have had conveyed to us in our life, and yet to re-prepare sometimes requires us to unravel those barbed wire-like pieces from our lives.
They're
Very
no
important.
longer useful.
Exactly.
Still valuable, but
Yep.
no longer useful.
Yeah.
I like that.
So,
What I had too in my mind was you have this barbed wire and you have this barb, and you got to take care of that one.
yeah. Yeah.
Then you go back and take care of this one,
Okay.
and then maybe go back and make sure this one's okay, and then take care of this one, then go to this one, and then go back and review, and then take care of this one. You know
And
what I
that
mean?
forgiveness
Yeah,
process.
forgiveness process,
Yeah.
reperception,
Yeah.
preparation, being aware that that's the way it is. It's kind of like I heard someone once say out of a highly confrontive seminar series, that's what's so what? Well, that's kind of unkind, but that's what's so what are you going to do?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're left with certain alternatives, and there are healthy ones and unhealthy ones, and you've chosen the healthy ones.
Well, the re-preparation one, I tried to re-envision that person whose life may have been so disappointing, so unsettling, so filled with fear and uncertainties, that their acts of desperation just brought them to that point. I can understand that. I can understand people being desperate. Most of our people in our culture are, what they say, 90 days from the street, because of our excessive credit abuse or use and the uncertainty of jobs and careers that are common in people's lives. So re-perceiving him as being an unprepared person rather than a deliberately sinister person allows me to say, I understand.
And be prepared.
Yes.
Someone did him in.
You bet.
Yeah, fascinating.
Doesn't excuse him from his behavior.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should be accountable. Gosh, this is an awfully fast half hour. I mean, this shot by. We may have another few moments, but I do want to make it clear to people that we've got a most exciting website. The fellow named Scott Johnson, our webmaster, has sacramentocity.com. And what he's putting together is some of the businesses in the community where people can go in and shop and roam around, like newcomers and people who need to spread out. And so in sacramentocity.com/BurnMoses, they can come and see what we do and how we do it, the extent of the essays that we cover, television schedules, all kinds of things. And part of the Sacramento City bargain was that we give away an entire series to a couple. If I'm not mistaken, it could be as high as $500 or $600 in rendered services. Rendered services that you have put a value on of how much would you think? What would you think?
I would trade my entire university degrees and educational background for the verbal essays that you present to people. They're so profoundly effective and delightful to experience, entertaining, thrilling actually, to finally have tools for living and making a living instead of just the rules. We've got plenty of rules. We need tools.
And when we talk about this, sometimes we say there's a price and a value and a cost. And the price is, I think, $360. And I should know better, but I have agents that do most of that. But so we were talking about $500 or $600 is the price. The value, I mean, I have had people estimate it at tens and tens of thousands. And the cost of not doing it. I mean, that can be
Tens of thousands of dollars.
yeah.
Incredible
Hundreds of thousands.
heartache.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you check in at sacramentocity.com/BurnMoses and pick up on that, why register for the freebie and hopefully you'd win. And so that would be fun. It's time to go. Stephen Mills, Gina Fitt. This has been Life Talk about life living and loving and making a living. And I'm
Burn Moses.
Thank you.
Thank you, Burn.
Thank you both.